The fear is that this is going to work too well and actually overburden the healthcare system.
Not everybody reacts. Blood pressure over time puts more tension on the heart, and this is where you start to basically suffer. Like, that's kind of precondition for heart disease. Take any random sample of people. There are people who know they have a problem, they will never take action.
So, the FDA cleared Apple Watches to detect sleep apnea using just an accelerometer and machine learning trained on 10,000 patients. AirPods, they've now become hearing aids for just $250. You now have premium grade hearing aids through your AirPods. Any medical device company charging $500 for sleep studies, $3,000 for hearing aids, $30 a month for data has just had their business completely destroyed as Apple now gave away, basically, not really for free, but just with the iPhone. You're an iPhone user, you now have access. But there is an angle to this, whereas there is a lot of hardware now that we have on our smartphones. This doesn't necessarily directly connect with Epic EHR. There's still a $10 to $20 integration gap there. This technology is still entering the market. But I guess the question is, what does all this new technology mean for the medical industry to have this on your smartphone?
There are a few things that this changes. The first one is the medical industry, the clinical process was not meant to have this 24/7 data connectivity. So even though you have this data, physicians are now struggling to figure out, what does it mean? Does it create liability for me? Because if a patient in the middle of the night has a heart attack or has a bit of a high blood pressure, gets the notification on his phone, and I have this recorded, what does that mean for me? Am I at risk? Am I liable for certain things? The second is what you just mentioned, is that when something like Apple gets into the hearing aid market or the blood pressure device market, what typically happens is a migration of value from all of these device companies to now, Apple takes the hardware part of this, but now we have the data connectivity part of this, right? When previously every device manufacturer connected their backends to an Epic, to a Cerner, to any of these EMRs or other specialized hospital tools. Now it's a new way to do this. It's an Apple connectivity to the hospitals, and now there's companies that emerge to deal with this connectivity layer.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like almost this is like a new model. Like the entire industry is now going to start pivoting more towards smartphone usage, is what you're saying.
I think a consumer or a patient would want is not to have another device on them. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if the same device, the same ring, the same watch that I'm wearing is able to, help me with my hearing disability, or help me translate to another language, or, notify me when my blood pressure is off, mm-hmm. Why would I want another device? In fact, I think in the future, it's like the more seamless, the less intrusive your device is, the better you are, right? Like that's where it becomes easier to adhere to it as a patient, easier to comply. I'm not changing, I'm not introducing something new to my day-to-day.
I used to know an old Italian guy in my neighborhood who, he couldn't really walk very well, and he refused to use a walker. To him, it was like the most terrible thing ever. So what he did was he had a shopping cart, and he used to always walk around with the shopping cart to pretend that he was just shopping. And I know a lot of old people who, elderly people, the idea of maybe wearing a hearing aid is kind of not something they'd be interested in. But, I'm just putting in my AirPods. It seems much more convenient and kind of brand-wise, less intrusive. What does this mean then for the old guard? Like, what does this mean for the hearing aid companies and the sleep apnea companies and the data companies?
We will see, I think we're still going to continue to see a shift or a blurring of the line between kind of consumer grade devices and like medical grade devices. So, Oura Ring is another favorite example that comes to mind, because they still are in the kind of consumer grade, but at the same time they've managed to get into hospitals, do sleep studies, and therefore they're now also in the kind of medical side of the business. And I think in general as a trend, what we're seeing is almost like a fusion between the wellness space and the medical space. They're just kind of getting closer, and this gap is bridging between them, which is a great thing to see.
Mm-hmm. I know that you're an Oura Ring user. Do you have any complaints about it? Like, do you think that there's somewhere that the Oura Ring could improve?
I mean, yes. Every device manufacturer, like every product, has ways to improve. Adding more capabilities or enhancing whatever exists. Like, so, to me, I'm sure the Oura team, I'm like, okay, can it measure my blood glucose? I think that'll be perfect, right? Can it measure the blood pressure? It kind of tracks pulse, yes, but not blood pressure yet, not glucose, but is that possible?
Mm-hmm. So, yes, okay, fair enough. If you had, are you optimistic about this pivot? Like, if you were holding maybe shares or you're in private equity, would you be nervous if you were selling hearing aids or selling medical devices?
Of course. This changes the landscape. This changes the market, changes the demand. There could be some protections when you're designated as a medical device. Sometimes insurance will chip in and pay for certain equipment. So there is that kind of hurdle for the consumer side to navigate and make sure you're designated a medical device, and therefore you're now covered by insurance.
I wonder if you can get insurance to buy you EarPods, though. Because they are FDA approved, aren't they?
Yes, right. So I don't know the specifics. Now it depends on your plan, what's covered. So there's a lot of things to navigate there. But I think companies who are smart about it will use this way to fund growth like crazy, right? Like if for me as a patient, this is not going to come out of pocket, and now I can get an AirPod, and that's a medical device that is covered by insurance. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I also know that there's a lot of sort of alternative options coming out of Asia, where people are maybe building, wearables that are a little bit cheaper, a little bit more economic. Do you think that maybe nothing that would be approved by the FDA, but do you think that there'll be a lot of wearables coming out of Asia that might be a little bit more economic in the future for people to play around with?
I think so, right? And I think it's great for Asia itself, because not everybody in Southeast Asia, for example, can afford an Apple Watch or an AirPod or any of these things. And so, of course, there will be the consumer grade and medical, cheaper alternative medical devices. Old age, you have the blood pressure cuff you get in your physician's office, right? Whenever that's kind of considered the gold standard. Then you had a lot of those, inflatable cuffs that you can put on your wrist to measure your blood pressure, and then other IoT connected devices. The big innovation in the last 2 years is now there is a watch. There's a cuffless watch. You know what about cuffless? It doesn't have to inflate, it doesn't have to squeeze your hand. Now you can wear that watch and it actually measures your blood pressure. That's a game changer for anyone who has to do this on a daily basis. And so you had this go from, no innovation in the space to one breakthrough, and now we have this kind of cuffless model, and we have it in a watch. And once a couple companies do this, and you go manufacture it in, say, China, now we have a million gazillion replicas that do the same thing. That are, knockoffs that are 10x cheaper than what you'd buy. Now you can buy one today for probably $20 in wholesale.
So then, how does this data that Apple Watches now give patients access to, how does this change? I know that there is a lot of sleep data nuances, but does having all this sort of easy access to data change the insurance landscape, change the testing landscape? What does this mean?
Of course, it changes the entire landscape, because now we can track people where, before to get sleep data, you had to go to a lab, and you might have to basically spend the night or a few in that sleep lab. And if you can do that same lab from the comfort of your home, and you can basically collect this data over a year or two or 10 this is going to be wonder for population health, assuming we know how to flow the data between the platforms. Being able to track my population as a clinic or as, government level, state level, can I track health data over the population, see how diseases are spreading? So I think there is a lot of benefits to have from this data. Of course, there's risks as well associated, but whenever you have this kind of type of new ongoing data, we have regulations that have to change. We have technology that has to be built to, enable ingestion of such real-time data. How do you alert based on this data? What is critical and what is not? So that pretty much changes the landscape from regulatory to technology to business, right? Like, can I now offer based on this data new products and services? Continuous healthcare monitoring and, I think a lot of things that were previously after the fact interventions and reactive can now become proactive. Like if I detect that your blood pressure is on the rise, it's actually trending higher over time, we have a problem. We need to get you treated.
Yeah, it's a good point. Just hearing you say that reminded me, we were watching this dumb show from 20 years ago where they had a competition to see who could go the longest without sleeping. And part of the show was they brought them to the sleep clinic. And it's, 20 years ago, but it's just all these computers, all these things, Nowadays, your Apple Watch can just collect that data mostly for you. So what's the big picture of all this, all these new devices? Like, what does the future look like?
The future is slimmer devices, blurring of the boundary between consumer and medical grade. Consumer can become medical grade, especially if you're kind of in the luxury segment or the higher end. And then, we expect to see new medical services, products being offered based on that. Of course, this changes the game from hardware play to software play, because once hardware becomes a commodity or built in, all the innovation shifts to the software side of things. And what are the new use cases we can enable with such data? And then will we have the regulatory space catch on to allow these new use cases?
So that's kind of Apple, right? Like Apple has the hardware, now it's time for the software. Who's gonna win in all of this? Like, who's the ultimate winner? Is it Asia? Is it Apple, Samsung, Microsoft, you, me, clinics?
You have to see how the landscape will shift, right? Like there's always, for everything that happens, there's pros and cons. There's good and bad, and you'll see both things play out. Mass surveillance is a bad thing that can happen because of such data. At the same time, being able to intervene before it's too late, being proactive about this data is a big opportunity. I think we'll have to wait and see.
And do you think private equity is caught on to this yet, or do you think they're lagging behind?
There are a lot of smart private equity groups that are already thinking about this potential, and there's at least a couple of use cases that I've seen with like better remote patient monitoring devices. I now can, for example, free up hospital bed capacity, because if I know that I can release this patient, and if we see signs of fever, if we see signs of distress, we can always call them back, bring them back to hospital. So I think better, more seamless, more convenient remote patient monitoring devices are going to be are on probably a lot of smart people's radars.
And we've already kind of chatted about this many times, but with the EMRs, do you think ultimately there will be kind of a bridge between the clinic and your phone, or is that just not possible?
Things have to change from where they are right now. I think the big EMRs are always kind of caught up. For example, Apple Health and My Chart, there's a connection there already to Epic. Right, but then you and I know, and we meet some smaller EMRs every day where they barely have an API to anything. So it's going to be a mixed landscape. It's going to be very, very interesting. I don't believe any of the EMRs that were built in the previous generation are designed to handle this. They're not designed for kind of mass ingestion of real-time data that is flowing 24/7 from all my patients at all time. It's a new paradigm in healthcare data.
And how do you think the old wearables companies with hearing aids or sleep apnea or sleep study clinics, like how will they react to this pivot?
It's gonna be hard. The only way to, like, one, you have to keep selling what you're selling, but then you have to evolve with the time, right? You'll either have to become a software play, right, like algorithm play, or come up with different innovations on your existing devices. Can they do more? Can they do it better? But that's gonna be tough. That's always.
So it's almost like you're saying it's kind of over. It's not going to be good.
You have to become a data company. And unfortunately, you'll be relying on the historic data, right? It depends. I think you have to evolve. If you're a hearing aid company with one line of business and that's it, that's game over. So now what else can you do?
Do you think that it's worth it for a company like Apple to almost acquire some of these companies, or do you think it's completely pointless and they don't need them?
You have 50% of the US market. Why the heck do you care?
It's a
You
good
already
point.
have those people.
Do they have data though? I mean, they have data on people obviously, but they don't have sleeping data. I guess in order to train, they would have had to get data in order to get the FDA approval. So they probably...
Yeah, but that's a sample. That doesn't have to be, millions of data. And you don't have millions of data, you have nothing to train on, so you have nothing useful. Right? Like, my customer data, if I'm a hearing aid company, my customer data is limited to whatever I know about them. Most hearing aids don't have any IoT connectivity type of thing anyways, so there is no data to be collected in the first place. But I think it's not the same, for example, if I look at GCM continuous glucose monitoring devices, like the cuff or the kind of glucose thing, whether you pinch yourself or whether it's the patch, those guys are sitting on tons of data. That data is flowing to EMRs, and I believe, I hope that the continuous glucose monitoring market can come up with new devices. Right now, it's still intrusive, right? Like, I either have to prick your finger, or even when you wear the patch, there's still like a needle in there, and it might come off, et cetera, et cetera. Versus, is there a way that is basically no prick, no blood, no needle experience to measure glucose? That'll be super.
This is one of the things you kind of mentioned at the start, and I want to run back to it. So Apple thinks that they can effectively alert 1 million people to hypertension, which is like a cardiology. What does that mean, Shukri? Like your blood is...
Hypertension is an elevation in your blood pressure, right? So typical human being, typical average adult, 120/70 is your blood pressure, right? If you have high blood pressure, your systolic and diastolic are shooting into like 150, 160. And what this does is like elevated blood pressure over time puts more tension on the heart. And this is where you start to basically suffer. Like that's kind of precondition for heart disease.
And the fear is that this is going to work too well and actually overburden the healthcare system. Is that a reality, you think?
Possible, but look, all I know is that people not everybody reacts, right? Take any random sample of people, there are people who know they have a problem, they will never take action. And that tends to be, 70-80% of the people. And then you have 10 to 20% that will take action on things. And so would 10 to 20% of 1 million overwhelm the healthcare system? I mean, not as bad as, it wouldn't unfold as bad as COVID, for example, but no, I don't think so.
If you were in private equity and you had, the cash to invest, like where would you go now with this announcement?
I have a device in mind. There is a helmet that I've seen at Health. I would go invest in that. This is actually a good company. I've just seen them recently. Brian Johnson used that for his mushroom experiment, where he basically maps his brainwaves before and after.
I saw a Brian Johnson video where I saw a Brian Johnson video where he was in this chamber. He was in do you know what I'm talking about? Pressurized chamber?
I do not recall that.
It's like a therapy you can do, or you can sit in like a pressurized...
It's not cryo? It's not cryotherapy, like a cold?
I'll send it to you after. You can look into it.
The company I'm thinking about is Kernel. I met them at Health. they have like a wearable helmet that will map your brainwaves. It's pretty cool, except it's very expensive. Right now it's like a few $100,000 to get one. But
Do you
I'm
think
like, this
that
is great.
what's the use of this device though, just to measure your
Mapping of brainwaves?
and what's the value of that
Which,
though?
my God. Okay, so everything you do in your wake and sleep, so your brain has different brain waves depending on whether you're restful, whether you're awake, whether you're sleeping, whether you're tired. If I map all your brain waves, I can basically pretty much map all the activity that happens in your brain. What can I do with that? Literally everything, because in one extreme, I can basically I can map out who you are just by mapping your brainwaves, how you react to conditions, to things, to questions, mental health, wellness, depth, like how well do you focus, do you have ADHD? So this like you can basically use it to diagnose neurological issues potentially. You can use it to control computers, which is crazy, right? Like imagine being able to think and then, do things on the screen. All of these things, like essentially, if I have a helmet on you that maps your brainwaves, I can map what you see in real time as you see it. I can map how you react to it. I can map out whether you react to it emotionally or logically. Pretty much you can understand people better in every way. And you can probably, the reverse of that is if you're able to influence the brainwaves, then you basically have one heck of a control device.
Got it. You could use that for mind control effectively.
Literally mind control. And there are helmets like that. If you want to geek out, DARPA at some point created a helmet that once you put it on, it allows you to sustain focus longer. And they've actually piloted this on snipers. So something like that.
That's a cool little fact.
Yeah.
Do you think that these companies are going to make mistakes going forward? And what do you think they'll be if they are?
Don't we all? We're all going to make mistakes. You mean like the newer kind of generation companies?
Yeah, like Aura,
I mean, I'm
Apple.
pretty sure they've already made mistakes. They continue to make mistakes every day. The question is how you deal with it. Right? Like, do you think every Apple product launch was successful and was not a flop? Do you think that every device that shipped had no manufacturing issues? Right? It's just the question is how quickly you respond and how you do damage control or you kind of fix things. That's pretty much every company and every person.
We have all these old guard medical technology companies like Epic or maybe even ModMed or Athena. Android is an open source platform. Apple, you can get on the App Store. Do you think they're going to start making apps? Would that be the next step for them?
They've already, whether it's Epic or Cerner, Athena, ECW, all the big EMRs have marketplaces where you can host different apps. That's been there. But it's going to be very interesting in the AI world because what we're seeing now, even just me extrapolating what I'm seeing OpenAI do and how Claude is approaching things, we're going to have a blurring of the lines between apps, UIs, experiences, and AI, right? Think of it this way. If I can interact with ChatGPT and book patients into my practice, as an example, do I know what's happening behind the scene, or do I know that I'm interacting through GPT? And I think a lot of it is going to be the same way. I think the interface that the clinic uses, think of it this way. Forget the word EMR altogether, and think of how awesome it would be if you have a ChatGPT that basically knows everything about your practice, all the patients. You can ask it a question about, how much revenue we made. And you can also ask it questions about, hey, show me this patient chart. When was the last time we got blood work values for X?
So
That
it
is
sounds
the
like you're
future
saying
EMR.
the future almost isn't, Apple, Google, Epic, Athena, ModMed. It's like the future is AI, large language models with connectivity.
It's AI assistants. Essentially, the only thing you're going to see out of an Athena or an Athena marketplace app is still going to be your AI assistant interacting with all of these things. So it's going to be your AI assistant at the end of the day.
Well, thank you so much for chatting. And
Thank you.
Cheers.
Sure.